Single mother arrived to find 3 children and a cabin without walls. But she became the shelter they needed. The gravel road stretched endlessly before Sarah Chen's battered Honda Civic, each pothole sending shockwaves through her already aching spine. Her 7-year-old daughter Emma slept fitfully in the passenger seat, her small face pressed against the window, while boxes of their remaining possessions rattled in the back seat, like broken promises. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as she spotted the mailbox marker she'd been searching for. Riverside Cabin, Mile 3. Her sister May had said the remote property would be available for as long as needed, no questions asked. What May hadn't mentioned was the condition Sarah would find it in. The cabin emerged from behind a cluster of towering pine trees like something from a nightmare. What should have been walls were nothing more than skeletal wooden frames, exposed insulation hanging like tattered curtains in the mountain wind. The roof looked intact, but everything else seemed to be crying out for help. Sarah pulled the car to a stop and sat in stunned silence. This wasn't a home. It was barely a shelter. But as she looked at Emma's sleeping face and thought about the eviction notice they'd fled from in Seattle, she realized they had nowhere else to go. That's when she heard the voices. 3 small figures emerged from behind the cabin, moving slowly through the tall grass. 2 boys and a girl, all appearing to be between 8 and 12 years old, wearing clothes that had seen better days and carrying expressions that had seen too much. Sarah stepped out of the car cautious. "Hello there," she called softly, not wanting to startle them. The oldest boy, lanky with dark hair that hung over his eyes, stepped forward protectively in front of the other 2. "You the new lady?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone much older. "I'm Sarah. This is my daughter Emma." She gestured toward the car where Emma was now stirring. "Are you 3 staying here?" The boy nodded. "I'm Marcus. This is Lily and that's Jake." He pointed to the girl with braided hair and the younger boy who clutched a worn stuffed animal. "Our mum was supposed to come back last week," but his voice trailed off. Sarah's heart clenched. These children had been abandoned here, left to fend for themselves in this exposed cabin with winter approaching. She looked around at the property, no neighbors in sight, no cell phone service, just 3 vulnerable children and now her own daughter. "How long have you been here alone?" she asked gently. 12 days, Lily spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus has been taking care of us. He knows how to make the camp stove work and everything." Emma had fully awakened now and climbed out of the car, immediately gravitating toward Jake, who was close to her age. The 2 children eyed each other with the careful curiosity of animals testing the safety of new territory. Sarah surveyed the situation with the analytical mind that had served her well during her years as a project coordinator before the layoffs hit. 4 children, minimal resources, a structure that offered little protection from the elements, and winter weather that could arrive any day in these mountains. But as she watched Marcus's shoulders relax slightly, as if he'd been carrying the weight of the world and was finally getting the chance to set it down, Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. These weren't just homeless children, they were survivors, and she recognized that strength, because she'd been cultivating it in herself for months. "All right," she said, surprising herself with the decisiveness in her voice. "First things first. Let's see what we're working with here." The tour of the cabin revealed both challenges and possibilities. The frame was solid, the foundation sturdy. Someone had started renovating but clearly hadn't finished. There was electricity running to the building, and miracle of miracles, the plumbing worked. The kitchen area had basic appliances, and there were enough rooms framed out to give everyone some privacy once walls were installed. "Marcus, you've done an incredible job keeping everyone safe," Sarah said as they completed their walkthrough. The boy's face flushed with pride and relief. "But now we're going to work together to make this place actually livable." That first night, they huddled together in the one room that had complete walls, what would eventually be the master bedroom. Sarah had driven back down the mountain to the nearest town 40 minutes away to buy sleeping bags, canned food, a first aid kit, and emergency supplies. The children had stayed close together while she was gone, and she could see in their eyes how difficult it had been for them to trust that she would return. As they ate canned soup heated on the camping stove, stories began to emerge. Marcus, Lily, and Jake were siblings whose mother had brought them here when they'd been evicted from their apartment in Portland. She'd promised it was temporary, just until she could find work and get them back on their feet. Then she'd left one morning saying she was going to town for supplies and never came back. She probably got arrested again, Marcus said matter-of-factly, stirring his soup. She has problems with stuff, but she always comes back eventually. Sarah's heart broke for these children who had learned to normalize abandonment. Well, until she does, you're not alone anymore, she said firmly. We're going to take care of each other. Emma, who had been quiet during dinner, suddenly spoke up. Mama, are we going to live here forever? I don't know about forever, baby, Sarah replied honestly, but we're going to make it home for as long as we need to. The next morning brought their first real test. A cold front had moved in overnight, and Sarah woke to find frost covering the ground and her breath visible in the air. The children were all shivering in their sleeping bags, and she realized they couldn't survive many more nights without proper walls and heating. She spent the morning on the phone with local contractors, using the last of her savings to arrange for emergency wall installation. Most were booked for weeks, but one contractor, an older man named Bill who lived nearby, agreed to come assess the situation that afternoon. Mom, Bill said after his inspection, I've got to be honest with you. To do this job right, you're looking at $15,000 minimum, and that's just for basic walls and insulation. You need electrical work, proper heating, weatherproofing. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest that had become her companion since unemployment. What if we did some of the work ourselves? I'm handy, and Marcus here is incredibly capable for his age. Bill studied the children, who were watching the conversation intently. Tell you what, I've got some materials left over from other jobs. If you can provide the labor for the easier stuff, painting, some basic installation, I can get you walls up for $5,000, but you'll need to work fast. Weather's changing. $5,000. Sarah had exactly $6,000 left in her emergency fund. It meant depleting almost everything. But looking at the 4 children who were depending on her, the choice was clear. When can we start? She asked. The next 2 weeks transformed both the cabin and the unlikely family that had formed within its wall. Bill arrived each morning with materials and patient instruction. Sarah learned to use power tools she'd never touched before, while Marcus proved to have an intuitive understanding of construction that impressed even the experienced contractor. Lily turned out to have an artistic eye, helping to plan the layout and choosing paint colors from sample cards. Bill had brought Jake, despite being the youngest, was an excellent helper, fetching tools and holding boards steady with serious concentration. Emma blossomed with the addition of the other children. Having siblings for the first time in her life, she developed a confidence Sarah had never seen before. She learned to climb trees from Jake, had her hair braided by Lily, and looked up to Marcus with open adoration. The work was exhausting. Sarah's hands blistered and her back ached constantly, but every evening as they gathered around their makeshift table in the increasingly enclosed space, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. My mom used to sing while she cooked, Lily mentioned one evening as they prepared dinner together, before things got bad. What kind of songs? Sarah asked, stirring a pot of chili. Lily hummed a few bars of an old folk song, and soon Emma was humming along. Marcus pretended not to be interested, but Sarah caught him tapping the rhythm on his knee. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat by the window looking out at the star-filled sky. Her phone had buzzed with a text from her sister May. How are things going up there? Do you need anything? Sarah typed back, we're building something beautiful. By the 3rd week, they had walls, insulation and a functioning heating system. The children each had their own small room, and Sarah had created a cozy living area where they could gather. Bill had taught them to install laminate flooring, and they'd painted the walls in warm colors that made the space feel like a real home. But their greatest test came when the first snow began to fall. Marcus disappeared that morning, and when he didn't return by afternoon, panic set in. Sarah organized a search, leaving Emma with Lily and Jake while she hiked through the surrounding forest, calling his name. She found him 3 hours later, sitting on a fallen log by the small creek that ran behind the property. His cheeks were red from cold, and tears had frozen on his face. "Marcus, honey, what's wrong?" Sarah asked, wrapping her jacket around his shoulders. "She's really not coming back, is she?" he whispered. "My mom. It's been almost a month now." Sarah sat beside him on the log, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know what's going to happen with your mom, Marcus, but I know that you and Lily and Jake are safe now, and I promise you that no matter what happens, I won't let you face it alone. But what if they try to split us up? If social services finds out we're here without our mom?" It was a fear Sarah had been grappling with herself. Legally, she had no rights to these children. If authorities discovered the situation, the siblings could end up in different foster homes, scattered across the state. "Then we'll figure that out together," she said. "But Marcus, you need to know something. These past few weeks, watching you take care of your brother and sister, seeing how strong and capable you are, you've taught me what real courage looks like. Whatever comes next, we're family now. That doesn't just disappear." Marcus looked at her with eyes that seemed far too old for his 12-year-old face. "Really? Really? Now come on. Lily's making hot chocolate, and Jake is convinced he saw a bear track by the shed." That evening, as they sat around their small table, Sarah made an announcement. "I want to talk to all of you about something important. I've been doing some research, and I think there might be a way for us to make this arrangement official. It would take time, and there would be paperwork and court visits. But if it's what you all want, I'd like to explore the possibility of becoming Lily, Marcus, and Jake's legal guardian." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Lily started crying. Not sad tears, but the kind that come with overwhelming relief. Jake looked confused but hopeful, and Marcus sat very still. "You'd really want to do that?" Marcus asked quietly. "Even though we're not your real kids?" Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "Marcus, the moment you took responsibility for your siblings, the moment you showed Emma how to build a fort out of pine branches, the moment you helped me carry lumber without being asked, you became my real kid. All of you did." Emma, who had been listening carefully, piped up. "So they'd be my real brother and sisters? If that's what everyone wants, yes." The transformation that came over the children was immediate. Jake launched himself at Sarah for a hug. Lily burst into fresh tears, and even Marcus allowed a smile to break across his face. Winter settled over their mountain home with surprising gentleness. They developed routines and traditions. Saturday mornings were for pancakes and cartoons powered by their generator. Sunday afternoons were for hiking and exploring the surrounding wilderness. Weekday evenings were for homework and reading aloud by the fireplace. Bill had helped them install. Sarah had found part-time work she could do remotely, creating websites for small businesses. It wasn't much, but combined with some assistance programs she'd qualified for, it was enough to keep them fed and warm. The children thrived in ways that amazed her daily. Marcus had taken on the role of big brother to Emma with natural ease, teaching her to whittle and showing her how to identify animal tracks. Lily had started a small garden in the cleared area behind the cabin, dreaming of spring vegetables. Jake had overcome his initial shyness and became the family comedian, always ready with a silly joke or funny face. Emma, meanwhile, had developed a confidence and independence Sarah had never seen before. Living in this close-knit group had taught her to share, to help, and to find her own strength. One evening in February, as they were finishing dinner, they heard a car coming up the gravel drive. Sarah's heart stopped. Very few people knew they were living here, and unexpected visitors in their remote location usually meant trouble. A social worker stepped out of the sedan, followed by a woman Sarah recognized from the missing person report she'd filed weeks earlier, the children's mother. "Mama," Jake called out, running toward the woman before Marcus caught his arm. "Wait," Marcus said quietly, his protective instincts immediately activated. The woman, Angela, looked around at the scene before her. The well-maintained cabin, the children who were clearly healthy and cared for, the warm light spilling from the windows. "They look good," she said to the social worker, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and something else Sarah couldn't identify. The social worker, a middle-aged woman named Carol, introduced herself to Sarah. "We need to discuss the situation here. I understand you've been caring for these children without any formal arrangements." What followed was the most important conversation of Sarah's life. She explained how she'd found the children, the work they'd done together to make the cabin livable, and her desire to provide them with permanent stability. Angela listened quietly as her children stayed close to Sarah, their body language speaking volumes about where they felt safe. "The thing is," Angela finally said, her voice shaking, "I'm not in a position to take care of them right now. I'm in a program, trying to get clean, trying to get my life together, but that could take months, maybe longer, and they deserve better than waiting around for me to figure things out." She looked directly at Marcus. "Baby, you've had to be the grown-up for too long. It's not fair to any of you." Carol documented everything, the living conditions, the children's well-being, Sarah's employment and financial situation. She interviewed each child separately, asking about their feelings and their wishes. The legal process that followed was complex and emotionally draining. There were home visits, background checks, court appearances, and mountains of paperwork. But throughout it all, the five of them remained united. Angela, to her credit, participated in every step of the process. She signed relinquishment papers, attended counseling sessions with the children, and made it clear that she believed Sarah could provide the stability she couldn't. "I love them more than anything," she told Sarah during one particularly difficult meeting. "That's why I need to let them go." 6 months later, on a warm spring morning, Sarah stood in a courtroom holding a document that officially made her the legal guardian of Marcus, Lily, and Jake. Emma stood beside her, beaming with pride as she held hands with her new siblings. The cabin had continued to evolve along with their family. They'd added a deck where they ate breakfast on sunny mornings. Lily's garden had flourished, providing fresh vegetables throughout the summer. Marcus had built a workshop in the shed where he crafted furniture, and learned carpentry from Bill, who had become something of a grandfather figure to all the children. They'd also faced challenges. Jake had nightmares for months, processing the trauma of abandonment. Lily struggled with anxiety about Sarah leaving them. Marcus had difficulty accepting help, so used to being the one taking care of everyone else. But they worked through each challenge together, with the help of counselors and support groups, and with the unshakable foundation of love they'd built in their mountain home. 1 year after that first snowy night when they'd all huddled together in a single room, Sarah stood on their deck watching the 4 children play in the yard. Marcus was teaching Emma to use a pocket knife safely. Lily was showing Jake how to identify edible plants. They were laughing and arguing, and being wonderfully normally chaotic. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister May. "Still can't believe you went from unemployed single mom to guardian of 4 kids in the middle of nowhere. How do you do it?" Sarah smiled as she typed back, "One day at a time, one wall at a time, one child at a time." That evening, as they sat around their dinner table, a table Marcus had built himself from reclaimed wood, Sarah looked at each face illuminated by the warm lamplight. Emma chattering about a bird she'd seen, Jake trying to balance his spoon on his nose, Lily quietly sketching in her ever-present notebook, Marcus listening to his siblings with the patient attention of someone who knows how precious these moments are. They weren't a conventional family. They'd been assembled from broken pieces, built from necessity, and forged in the crucible of shared struggle. But they were real, they were strong, and they were home. "What are you thinking about, Mama?" Emma asked, noticing Sarah's contemplative expression. Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. I'm thinking about how sometimes the best things in life come from the scariest moments, how sometimes what looks like the end is actually just the beginning. Marcus nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd learned this lesson the hard way. Like when we first saw this place and it didn't have walls. Exactly like that, Sarah agreed. Sometimes you have to build your own walls. Sometimes you have to become the shelter. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. But inside their cabin, their home, they were warm and safe and together. Sarah had arrived months ago to find 3 abandoned children and a structure without walls. What she'd built instead was something much more valuable. A family who knew that love doesn't require blood, that home isn't a place you find but a place you create, and that sometimes the most important walls are the ones you build around each other's hearts. As they cleaned up dinner and prepared for another evening of homework and stories and the comfortable chaos of family life, Sarah realized that they'd all learned the same crucial lesson. Sometimes being broken is just the first step toward becoming whole.